I just watched the struggle that my kids were going through, and I actually, I went on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and trying to find something that we could use to cope at nights. Nights are the hardest, it seems like, for everybody when, dealing with anything, but I just wanted some story to read to my kids at night, and I just could not find anything. I couldn't find anything that really, suited them or helped them find comfort and peace, and so, I was like, let's just write one.
The Kouri Richins case is quite extraordinary. On one hand, she's a love-in and wonderful mother, a fairly good wife, and even an author. Her husband Eric is a great father, a good businessman, and it would seem, what could go wrong? But behind the facade of this perfect relationship, something gruesome was hidden. Well, for example, Kouri's debt. She owed quite a lot to investors. Friends and family expressed shock and disbelief when Kouri Richins was arrested in connection with the death of her husband Eric at their home in Commerce, Utah in 2022. "I was in shock," said her mother, Lisa Darden, recalling the moment she heard the news. They can't arrest her. Darden believed that Kouri and Eric had a great relationship, even though they sometimes faced difficulties in their lives. Ronnie Darden, Kouri's brother, said that at the time of Eric's death, they were probably in one of the best places in their relationship that I had seen in quite a long time. A year after Eric's death, Kouri wrote a children's book to help her sons cope with the loss of their father. And according to Lisa, the family was on the path to healing. Just 2 months later, Kouri was charged with his death. Well, what's interesting is the case is literally riddled with hypocrisy from Kouri. Yes, you could certainly say she's an amazing mother because she wrote an entire book to support her sons when they lost their father. But what if I told you that this same mother is the one who deprived her sons of their father? What is the real story of Eric and Kouri's marriage, which ended in tragedy? And it all begins with the wedding in 2013. On June 15, 2013, 23-year-old Kouri Darden and 31-year-old Eric Richins got married in the backyard of their home in Utah. They already had one son, and their family was about to grow. According to court documents, that day, the couple signed a prenuptial agreement stating that neither party had any rights to the present or future income, property, or assets of the other, except in the event that Eric died while they were legally married. In that case, his stone masonry business, C&D Masonry, would go to Kouri. April 2019. Kouri Richins starts her business in real estate. Kouri founded her real estate business, K. Richins Realty, LLC, in 2019. She began buying homes, renovating them, and selling them for a profit. According to Kouri's family, as her business grew, she usually worked on 3 houses at the same time. This was what she loved to do, said Kouri's friend and marketing director, Greg Hall. Kouri was very successful at what she did. Eric's family spokesperson, Greg Skordas, told 48 Hours something different. He claims that Kouri wasn't that experienced, and court documents show that by 2022, Kouri's business was drowned in millions of dollars of debt. Apparently, it was then that a rather nasty but well thought out plan began to brew in Kouri's head. After all, Eric was wealthier and richer than her, so she probably thought, I have a prenuptial agreement that says very clearly, in the event of Eric's death, all income, the whole business will be mine. I quite admit that back then, she wasn't thinking about any family happiness. She was only thinking about money. Prosecutors claimed that in 2019, Kouri started stealing from Eric's accounts and illegally taking money coming in from Eric Richins' business. Court documents allege that without Eric Richins' knowledge or permission, Kouri used a fake power of attorney to take out a $250,000 loan secured by the family home, and then withdrew the entire $250,000 from this home equity line of credit. Kouri's family insists that she didn't steal from Eric, and that Eric was always aware of the family's finances. Eric and Kouri would sit down every month and pay the bills together, says Lisa Darden. Eric always knew what was coming in and what was going out. November 2020. Eric Richins' Lifetime Trust. Prosecutors claim that at the end of 2020, Eric discovered that Kouri had illegally taken his money. Kouri's family disputes this claim, But in November, Eric did meet with estate planning attorney Crystal Bowman Carter to create a new estate plan. He created the Eric Richins Lifetime Trust and appointed his sister, Katie Richins Benson, as the trustee. In the event of his death, Katie, not Kouri, would manage his estate. Bowman Carter stated this in a declaration filed with the court. Eric told me he had two main goals. His first goal was to protect himself in the short term from the recently discovered and ongoing abuse and misuse of his finances by his wife, Kouri Richins. The second was to protect his three young sons in the long term by ensuring that Kouri would never be in a position to control his estate after his death. Kouri was not informed about this trust and only learned of its existence after Eric's death. And you know, Eric really does act like a loving father, but there's just one thing I don't understand. You already know that your wife is lying to you. You know that she's the one taking money from right under your nose, but why do you continue to live with her? For what? You'll tell me, well, because of the children. And that's probably the only answer I'm willing to agree with. Because otherwise, living under the same roof with someone who's deceiving you is quite strange. Early 2022, Kouri Richins allegedly asked for drugs. Prosecutors claim that in early 2022, Kouri Richins asked her housekeeper, referred to in court documents as Carmen Lauber, to get her fentanyl. Court documents state that Carmen told investigators she sold fentanyl to Kouri. The court documents also say that phone records show text messages between Kouri and Carmen from January 2nd until shortly after Eric's death were deleted from Kouri's phone. Kouri's former attorney, Sky Lazaro, claims that the evidence isn't strong enough to prove that Kouri ever bought drugs. She says there are no witnesses to back up Carmen's statements, and that Carmen, who is a convicted felon, isn't trustworthy. Lazaro said that when Carmen spoke with investigators, she was on probation. I think that whenever you're dealing with an informant who's been promised something by, law enforcement or prosecutors, it can call the credibility of their statements into question. February 14th, 2022. According to the prosecution, on Valentine's Day 2022, shortly after Kouri gave Eric a sandwich, he broke out in hives and started having trouble breathing. He used his son's EpiPen and fell asleep. According to the indictment, Eric believed he had been poisoned and told a friend that he thought his wife had tried to poison him. Kouri's defense disputes this version of events in court documents. The documents state that on that day, Kouri bought lunch for herself and Eric, and that he simply felt unwell after eating and went to take a nap. Kouri's former attorney, Sky Lazara, states that aside from the family's claims, there's no evidence supporting the theory that Eric was poisoned. And here again, I don't understand how Eric remained so calm, even suspecting that it was his wife who poisoned him. At the very least, Eric could have called the police. Well, let's say if it wasn't his wife who poisoned him, but one of the kids, the police would have conducted a proper investigation and simply put that person in jail. But as it was, he didn't even show any initiative. The end of February 2022. Court documents describe a second alleged transaction between Kouri and her housekeeper Carmen, which took place at the end of February 2022. According to these documents, Carmen told investigators that Kouri said the fentanyl pills Carmen had previously provided weren't strong enough, and that Kouri asked for something like what Michael Jackson had. The documents state that Carmen later admitted that Kouri may have mentioned Michael Jackson during her first request for fentanyl. Sky Lazaro insists that Kouri never made such statements and never bought substances from Carmen, and also that Carmen's stories are inconsistent and unreliable. The program 48 Hours reached out to Carmen for comment, but she did not respond. Now, according to the prosecution, Carmen Lauber was the key witness here. This is the woman who worked with Kouri as a cleaning lady, but also had a criminal past related to drug dealing, and admitted in court that she used drugs and had struggled with addiction in the past, although she claims that she is clean now. But Carmen said that Kouri approached her 4 times, asking her for drugs, and said it was all for an investor. And then Kouri apparently asked Carmen Lauber to give her something stronger than the painkillers she had gotten in the past. Anyway, Carmen changed her testimony several times, so calling her a witness is quite difficult, and it's not clear at all whose side she was on. She tried to protect herself first, then tried to clear Kouri of suspicion. And all of this is quite strange. March 4th, 2022. It was on this day that Summit County Sheriff's deputies and paramedics arrived at the Richardsons' home in Camas, Utah at 3:31 a.m. They found Eric Richards dead. According to court documents, when they arrived at the scene, a paramedic determined that he had been dead for some time. The documents state that at the scene, Kouri told investigators that before bed, she made her husband a cocktail, then went to sleep with her son, who had been having nightmares. She said that when she returned to Eric around 3 in the morning, he was unresponsive, and she called 911. Eric's family spokesperson, Greg Skordas, describes Eric's death as a tremendous loss. He was a wonderful son, brother, and father. He cared about people, and he cared about everything he did. March 5th, 2022. The day after Eric's death, Kouri Richins closed a major deal she had made for her house flipping business. This 20,000 square foot mansion in Heber City, Utah, worth $3.9 million. Kouri's family says that Eric supported the plan to renovate the house and sell it for a big profit. Kouri and Eric once met with an accountant, Lisa Darden told 48 Hours, and he said, if you can get everything done and stay within budget, you could walk away with $12 million. But according to the search warrant, Eric's family told investigators that Eric was unhappy with the purchase and that he and Kouri argued about this property before his death. He was willing to support his wife, said family spokesperson Greg Skordas, but that doesn't mean he agreed with it. March 6, 2022. An argument breaks out. According to court documents, 2 days after Eric's death, there was an argument at the family home between Kouri Richins and Eric's sister Amy. Prosecutors claim that Kouri called a locksmith to try to open the safe in the house, and Amy objected. Amy allegedly told Kouri that Eric's assets held in trust did not belong to Kouri, and Kouri became furious and struck Amy in the face and neck. I was standing between them, says Kouri's brother. They were just shoving each other. Both of them were trying to reach over me, so the story they tried to push, that poor Amy was attacked, is complete nonsense. Kouri was charged with assault, and later did not contest the charge. April 2022. According to court documents, after the autopsy in April 2022, it was determined that Eric died from a fentanyl overdose. The medical examiner stated that Eric had 15 nanograms of fentanyl per milliliter in his blood, while in other fentanyl-related deaths, the concentration was only 3 nanograms. This data indicates that the amount of fentanyl Eric took was 5 times the lethal dose. By the way, remember how Kouri asked Carmen for something that Michael Jackson had? Yeah, you understood correctly. Fentanyl is the very substance that was in Michael Jackson's cocktail. By the way, this substance alone wasn't lethal, but combined with others, it caused the singer's death. Its properties are similar to morphine, but the effect is much stronger. March 7th, 2023. Kouri's family says that after Eric's death, Kouri and her sons went through a very difficult time. The boys were acting out a bit because they couldn't fully understand what was happening, says Kouri's brother, Ronnie. They needed help, and Kouri needed help too. According to Kouri and her family, to help her sons cope with their grief, Kouri wrote a children's book called Are You With Me? On March 7th, 2023, she self-published the book and started selling it on Amazon. It tells the story of a child who lost his father, but remembers that his absence is still felt everywhere. Kouri's family says it helped her and the boys, and they were on the path to healing. In April 2022, Kouri promoted the book on a local TV show called Good Things Utah. On May 8th, 2023, Kouri Richins was arrested and charged with the murder of her husband. Prosecutors allege that when Kouri made Eric that drink just hours before his death, she intentionally poisoned him with fentanyl she had bought from Carmen. She was charged with 1 count of first-degree felony aggravated murder, as well as 3 counts of second-degree felonies related to possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute. Kouri maintains her innocence. Her family suspects that Eric accidentally took something, possibly THC gummies, which they say he often used, without knowing they were laced with fentanyl, and that his death was a tragic accident. The state will have to prove that she did it, that she obtained the drugs, and that she somehow gave them to him, said Kouri's then attorney, Sky Lazaro, on the program 48 Hours. And if they can't connect those facts, it'll be hard for them to prove murder in this case. On June 12, 2023, Kouri Richins made her first public court appearance to request release on bail. Her attorney was hopeful, aiming to prevent Kouri from being denied bail. The state would have to prove that there was substantial evidence in the case against her. During the 4-hour hearing, prosecutors presented evidence and called several witnesses, including Chris Katadrimos, a mobile phone expert, and Detective Jeff O'Driscoll, the lead investigator on the case. One of the topics expert Katadrimos discussed was the report on Google search queries that Kouri made during the year following Eric's death. Among the searches were things like, can the FBI find deleted messages, and what is a lethal dose of fentanyl? During cross-examination, defense attorney Sky Lazaro drew attention to the timing of the Google searches, emphasizing that they were made after Eric Richins' death. According to her, these were innocent questions that Kouri had because of what she was being accused of in this case. When Detective O'Driscoll testified in court, he talked about the interrogations he conducted with Carmen. He said that Carmen gave him the dates and times when Kouri allegedly bought fentanyl from her. Sky Lazaro argues that she, as a convicted criminal, is not a credible witness, and that the state has no evidence that Carmen ever sold anything to Kouri. During cross-examination, she asked the detective if there were any text messages from Kouri or any witnesses to back up Carmen's story, and he replied that investigators found nothing. At the end of the hearing, the judge denied Kouri Richins' request for release on bail. She remains in custody until the start of the trial on November 3, 2023. This unsent letter, found in Kouri's jail cell, became known as the walk the dog letter because of the words scrawled at the top of the page. Its contents became a point of contention in the case. Prosecutors argued that it was evidence that Kouri was involved in witness tampering. According to prosecutors, in the letter Kouri writes to her mother and gives her instructions about what her brother Ronnie should say in court. She writes that her defense needs some kind of connection between Eric and drugs. She says, here's what I think. But you need to talk to Ronnie. He'll probably have to testify about this. But it's very brief. Nothing complicated. It seems she's asking her mother to tell Ronnie to tell a story about how Eric told Ronnie that he gets painkillers and fentanyl from Mexico. On November 3, 2023, prosecutors filed a motion for a no-contact order, asking the judge to limit Kouri's communication with her mother and her brother Ronnie. Kouri's then attorney, Sky Lazaro, argued that the letter was not an attempt to bribe witnesses. This is not an attempt to influence a witness, she said on 48 Hours, because it didn't go anywhere and wasn't given to anyone. She claims that this document was personal and should never have been made public. The judge denied the state's motion, stating that prosecutors failed to prove an attempt to influence a witness. On November 12, 2024, the judge for the second time denied Kouri Richins bail, ordering that this Utah mother remain in jail until the start of her trial for her husband's death. Opening statements in her trial began on February 23, 2026, in Park City, Utah. On March 17, 2026, Kouri Richins was found guilty on all charges, including aggravated murder. Sentencing is scheduled for May 13th. She faces life in prison. Most likely, Kouri Richins will receive a very long prison sentence. Yes, maybe not life, but the sentence will be very long. I think she should have cooperated with the investigation. Then her sentence would be shorter. Surely this girl was confused, as she had a lot of debt. But she had a family. She had a loving husband, and they could have solved her problems together. But for some reason, instead, she decided to poison him and take all the money for herself. It's very mercenary and terrible on her part. She killed her husband, thereby ruining her own life and the lives of all their children. After all, they'll grow up essentially without parents, because the mother will be behind bars and they simply won't have a father. And that's all for today, dear friends. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Also, thanks for watching the videos to the end. It really helps with promotion. See you soon. Bye everyone.